So we have wonderful colleagues here from all over, and we're really excited today to bring you the last of the 9 and 9 overtime series, but don't despair. We will have more starting in March, and those will be UDL 3.0 in higher education. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward here if my screen cooperates. And as I just said, we will have these new webinars coming up on March 11th, April 8th, May 13th, and there's two more, right, Anjanette, or three more, June and July, two more after that. And those are the topics, and we're very, very excited. Not to be outdone by anybody else, but we're going to have UDL and AI and Tilt, which is really looking forward to that. And all the presentations that are upcoming. So stay tuned and please go ahead and register for the ones coming up. And I see Rob, you are here. Um, One thing I want to share before we get started here is our brand new UDL 3.0 tip series. We had for UDL 2.0 on our Goodwin University Institute for Learning Innovation, we had a series for 2.0. These are tips that practice tips for higher ed. You can download them, and the links are going into the chat. And if you prefer to listen, we are also providing podcasts, which are in progress. The tips, there's 10 of them. Podcasts, I think we're up to three. Our colleague Brian Dixon is doing the podcast. We're really, really excited about that. And soon, hopefully, there'll be access to student versions of these. So we mirrored whatever we were sharing with instructors with a mirror tip sheet for students. And hopefully those will be posted soon. But right now we have the faculty one, and we're very excited. As I said, there's 10 of them. Um, if you enjoy them, let us know. Speaking of AI and UDL, used AI to help develop these so much. One of my colleagues emailed me before today's presentation to say that they are going to be doing some work with UDL and AI and instructional design. So lots going on out there around UDL. Today, we're very fortunate to have with us Karla Bell and Nannette Fromm. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
You're
Yay.
good.
Who are going to talk to us about engagement being redefined and really looking at how we do this with inclusive and equitable practice. You know, alert, they have a great tool they're going to share, and we're very excited about that. They come to us from Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia, PA, in the US. And Nana is an associate dean of student affairs, and she's has a long history of working in higher ed, over 18 years, and most recently she's focused on faculty assessment, and they'll say more about themselves when they present. We also have Karla Bell here, who is a professor in the Department of Physical Therapy at Thomas Jefferson University, and she works and teaches in other departments as well. And she really is a champion of inclusive and equitable teaching and practices, and is known regionally and nationally for her work in that area. So without further ado, I am going to let them screen share. I'm going to stop talking and we'll let them take over. All right. So welcome and thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Diana. And thank you all for joining us for our conversation centered around redefining engagement using those UDL principles for inclusive and equitable teaching. Where we thought we wanted to start off as we think about building those senses of belonging and community, sharing experiences. Karla and I wanted to go through a little bit about what we bring to the conversation, what our backgrounds bring in terms of inclusive teaching, and belonging and collaboration in our works, in our educational environments. So I'm going to start and I'll pass it over to Karla. So just briefly, I am an educator. I was faculty for about 6 years at my prior institution and teach as an adjunct here at Thomas Jefferson University, and do consider myself educated as I've had the power and privilege and the opportunity to obtain my master's degree and also continuing with supplemental lifelong learning endeavors. Um, but I'm also very well aware and very open about the fact that in academia, I'm in a position where normally a doctoral degree is held, and I have a master's degree level of education. And I share this because this is something that I carry with me into meetings, into dean's meetings, university enterprise level meetings, when I'm surrounded by name tags that say doctor on them all of the time. And I need to be very intentional in my thinking about finding my voice and sharing my knowledge and skill set. And I think that ties a lot to what we're going to be talking about in terms of creating a culture of belonging in our learning environments. And then if I move on over to the top right here, after an early career change, I was a CPA and decided the accounting world was not for me before going into healthcare. I began my healthcare career as a certified recreational therapist, working in a spinal cord injury rehab. That's where I was really first introduced to advocacy, universal design principles for just general environment, and also how our society really wasn't set up for the quote unquote norm of people. And then after my clinical world, I'm going to skip down here to sort of right center. When I transitioned from clinical work to academia, through my work at my prior institution, while it wasn't officially considered a minority serving institution, there were a high percentage of students of color, Pell Grant recipients, first generation students. And that's where I was really first introduced to the variety of lived experiences of my students and started realizing how much their lived experiences impacted the way they showed up in my classroom. In healthcare, we're always taught about the social determinants of health. And then as an educator, I realized I needed to start thinking about and paying more attention to what Chamberlain University has outlined, and it's their graphic that I've showed on the screen, what they consider the social determinants of learning. So when I do orientation for my students in the college, social determinants of learning is something I always spend about 15 minutes on with our students to say how important it is to realize what's going on in their lives impacts how they come into the classroom. And finally, my campus role. In addition to my role as an Associate Dean for Student Affairs, I did have the privilege for a while to serve as the Assistant Provost for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Impact at the university. And I got to interact with students across all of our colleges, hearing directly from them about their experiences in the educational environment. And I'll share a little bit of the thoughts that they shared with me throughout this presentation. So Karla, I am going to turn it over to you to provide some context of yourself.
Sure, thank you. Hi, folks in the room. So I'm Karla Bell. My pronouns are she and her they. And from the lens of looking through my positionality and what I bring to this work and where I've come and my lived experience, right? So I am certainly an educator first in my heart. I am a clinician, but education, I come from a strong education family of educators, and so I am educated. I actually am a lifelong getting educated myself, right? So I have two doctorates, because one was a clinical doctorate, and then I actually wanted to go back for a research doctorate in population health to again through the lens of doing this work and the lens of understanding that there are lived experiences in our world, right, that don't have the same opportunities, and that is same opportunities for anything, and that is also in learning, right, and access to learning and education, and how we actually help people to learn, right. I'm also a spouse. That is my wife and my son pictured there. And I also, from the lens of coming through, if you move to the right on the screen, right? So I grew up, financially stable in a, lower middle class family, didn't want for anything, but I'm also privileged in a lot of ways, right? And what privilege does for you is break down barriers. And so I use that lens every single time in my classrooms and in my healthcare, to check myself, right? Is because of on my assumptions, and everybody walking in the room and in the seats or in the clinical spaces where I'm teaching, right, may not have that lived experience. And I can't make assumptions about how they learn. I can't make assumptions about what is helpful to them until I actually hear from them, right? I'm also come from some not privileged identity groups. So I'm part of the queer community. I'm gender diverse. And what that lens brings to this work, right, is I'm relatable. I'm relatable, and people can relate to me. And through my lens of my social justice world and marrying it into the work that I do, lots of students have shared with me that it's really important to have role models, right, that actually share some of their experiences, and they feel heard, right? It's going back to that sense of belonging, and Nannette and I will talk about that throughout this presentation today as well. And so that is really kind of the positionality that I bring, and my passion for equity work and equity work in healthcare and equity work in learning. And so that's a lot of what my research focuses on as well: discrimination in healthcare, and also how can we do better in our learning environments, and sense of belonging for our students, because I believe that is really foundational. Okay, Nannette.
Thanks, Karla. So our focus today, which was on the first slide that Diana shared, is going to be in the engagement section of designing options for sustaining effort. And we are going to focus specifically on fostering collaboration, interdependence, and collective learning, and also belonging in community. So we actually were approached to submit for this webinar through our Teaching and Learning Center. We were working with them on our tool that we're going to show you. They were helping us build it, and they said, we think this would be great, and it would be a great tie to the UDL new guidelines. And when Karla and I looked at them, we really gravitated towards 8.3 and 8.4. And we chose to do them together because we really felt like these naturally interconnected. Karla just said, our learners need to feel seen, they need to feel like they're heard, and they need to be valued to comfortably engage in an environment that is collaborative and interdependent. So without this sense of belonging, really our attempts at collaboration, collective learning, interdependence can really lead to unintended negative outcomes if we're not paying attention to how we're building the foundation for that environment. Just a quick example that I have heard from students. Our institution is predominantly a white institution. So we have well-meaning faculty who want to do small group work, and they're going to assign those groups so that there's diversity of thought. Or diversity within those small groups. So I've heard of situations where, because there may only be one student of color or two students of color in the classroom, they become the person of one in a group that is predominantly white. So well-intended, get diversity of thought, but what's happening is, by organizing those groups based on limited demographic characteristics, we're creating an environment where that one person doesn't feel a sense of belonging to the group and may even be excluded from that group work. So we're really defeating our purpose for collaboration and collective learning. So really, simply put, when we're thinking about this topic, we're really thinking about how do we strengthen the learning environment where we're cultivating a space for collaboration, how we can promote belonging across all learners. And it's really based on that idea that we know that learning is relational. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. From childhood learning, we know that our brains learn best through interaction, through dialogue, through shared exploration. So that's just really one little snippet of why we felt this topic was important to address. So what we wanted to do is, and I will put this in the chat for you, is do a little Miro board, or if you're more comfortable working in the chat feature in the Zoom link, that's fine as well. We just wanted to get a sense of what you might already be doing in your own learning environments that promote belonging, or what your expectations are for a collaborative learning environment. What does that look like for you? What does that feel like when you're trying to set up a collaborative learning environment? And if you'll give me 1 second, you can start answering in the chat if that's easier for you. But I will also put the link in the chat to the Miro board. Of course, it was working before, and now I can't get it to.
Why don't we have people go ahead and use the chat? I think that'll be the easiest. Sometimes technology doesn't cooperate, right? And yeah, as much as we might practice. So please use the chat or the mirror board, whichever works
And the
best for
Miro
you,
board is in the chat right now.
the link. And we'll be watching the chat and helping here. And people I see are on the board.
I'm seeing a lot of movement. Are people writing comments? If you just click in your sticky, you'll be able to write what your thoughts are. Does anyone want to come off mute and share an answer to either of the questions? Things that you've intentionally done for community building, or what collaboration looks like in your environment.
Yeah, people say that they're trying to, the email is promoting me to enter their email. So, and Tolu shared that you can press the button to skip that.
Yeah,
So if people want, so we're a very small group today.
yeah.
So if people want to go off mute and shout it out, we're happy to hear that or put it in the chat.
And
Uh,
also, yes, right in the chat. I say I ask students to share favorite songs so I can make playlists to share. In a stats class, we use this as data. That's phenomenal, relating it to something that is important to them or comfortable for them.
Christine wrote in the chat, in first and second workshops, I welcome all students and reiterate that they belong in this higher education space. I provide multiple means for them, each to share what brought them to the course they are beginning. The subject for the first year students in social sciences. Thank you, Christine.
That's great. And Karla will be talking about that as one of the strategies of really acknowledging and make it a point to say you all belong here and not assuming people know. They might be walking in with that fear, that imposter syndrome. And then some comments about just what does collective collaborative learning look like in your environment, multiple perspectives being shared, managing discussions. All great. That's really what we want to see, is that voices are being heard, and people are being seen in that classroom environment. So I will go ahead and keep going. Of course, it went from the beginning. Let's see, current slide. This is not liking me today. I'm hitting from current slide and it still wants to show the original. All right. So for our learning objectives today, are you all seeing back to the PowerPoint? Perfect. Really, the CAST website, and now I know the Goodwin website, has a bunch of resources for you. Great resources on the new guidelines, research on why the guidelines are important. But for our remaining time here, what we really want to do is try to bring that 8.3, 8.4 collaboration, interdependence, collective learning, belonging, and community to life, providing you practical strategies that can be incorporated into your interactions with learners. We hope that you find that these strategies, when they're intentionally designed, are relatively easy to implement. Might require a little effort, but you're going to get maximum benefit out of it. We'll be introducing you to our faculty assessment and self-reflection tool that Karla and I worked with our diversity committee to develop. Note that the breadth of this tool is going to go beyond the two UDL guideline areas that we're addressing today to a more broader scope of inclusive teaching strategies. But we're going to focus our conversation on those strategies that we felt best align with the fostering community and building a collaborative learning environment. After this session, we will give you links to both our tool and the companion resource summary. We really hope that you can use this, that it assists you in identifying and congratulating yourself on those things that you're already doing well, that you maybe didn't realize was a UDL strategy or an inclusive teaching strategy, but also hopefully identifying some strategies that you can incorporate into your classes, maybe tweaking something little, or really developing an action plan to build something greater into your teaching and learning environment. So before we get into the tool, I wanted to give a quick background on the tool and the strategies and how they align with the culture of belonging, collaboration, and interdependence. So as I just mentioned, the self-assessment and reflection tool was developed with a foundation on inclusive teaching practices. There were 5 different principles that we built the tool off of. And what you see on this screen is the 2 of them that we felt most strongly aligned with the UDL principles. You'll find the other 3 in our companion resource guide that Karla will be going through and I will show you in a little bit. So when we think of sense of belonging, we're working from the definition of a learner's perceived connection. And I think of it as not only to your course or their academic program or other learners in the classroom, but also to their future careers. Sadly, in some of my conversations with students, when they felt alienated from their learning environment, I heard students not only want to give up and leave that program, but also question if they were good enough or the career that they chose was the right one for them, just because of the experiences they were having in their classroom. Some other themes that I heard from students where they indicated that sense of belonging was absent were themes of exhaustion. Students were constantly trying to demonstrate their worth or having to speak for their identity group. I heard themes of psychological harm where stereotypes were being perpetuated, socio-political context and things that were happening were not being acknowledged in the classroom and the impact on the students' learning. And I also heard emotional states of just being disheartened. Students were fighting for acknowledgement that the value they bring to the classroom, and also something as simple as the accommodations for equity in the classroom, fighting for those accommodations. So when I think about this sense of belonging, the thing that stands out to me the most is that it's an active process. And its implementation has to start with some type of deliberate design. And that rolls into critical engagement of difference. When I talk about action, when I talk about deliberate design, it really is our responsibility as facilitators of learning to lay that foundation for an environment that will capitalize on the varying identities, the varying life experiences that our learners bring to that learning environment. We know that we reach critical engagement of difference when we can start examining our own beliefs in relation to the beliefs and experiences of others and where we really deepen that collective learning. So again, same thing I said with belonging, engagement of difference isn't a haphazard occurrence. It really takes intentional design and implementation along with that sense of psychological safety and belonging. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to just throw them in the chat, come off mute, that's fine as well. So I wanted to take a quick second to just show you the Inclusive Teaching Practices Self-Assessment and Reflection tool. You will have a QR code after the presentation to access the tool for your future use, along with our companion resource guide that we developed to just help you understand what the areas on the tool were all about. So I'm not going to go through every specific section, but when you open the link, you will come to a screen that shows you all of the areas of the Inclusive Teaching Practices tool. Again, this is for self-assessment. This is for reflection. When we introduced it with faculty, it really was an optional exercise that we hoped people would use in their annual performance review with their department chairs to really say, what am I doing well and where do I want to grow? How can I improve the environment for my learners? You'll be able to navigate through all of the different sections. The real version that you have the link to, because we are doing research on the tool itself, it does give you an acknowledgement to just say that we are doing research and you're aware of that before you can navigate through all of the sections. But we give a little background about how we think you'll be able to use it. I will link to the companion resource guide in a second. And then you can really navigate through each of the sections. So each section will give you a series of questions. The first column allows you to indicate how often you feel like you use that strategy. So the first one, the example of I share a teaching philosophy with learners. You could indicate regularly, sometimes never, NA, or desire to try. The middle column is how do you demonstrate that strategy? We saw a lot of syllabus checklists online for looking at inclusive teaching, but not, okay, how do they incorporate it in a bigger sense? So it allows you to enter, is it in your learning management system? Is it your syllabus? Is it through an assignment, through a rubric? And then you can add additional comments here. We have some open-ended questions at the end to really allow you, if there was something not captured in the tool, that you're able to write in some thoughts you have. If you answered desire to try a strategy, it will allow you to put in what resources you think you need to be able to build your confidence, build your skill set in there. And then if you were to go to the very end, the great thing that we have tried to make this as user-friendly as possible is we want you to be able to download that report of all of your responses. So if you want to do this on multiple classes or one class and share this report with a learner ally, with your department chair, someone in your teaching and learning center, you're able to download a PDF of all of your responses to those questions. So I know that was quick, but we did just want to give you a glimpse of the tool and allow you to explore that on your own. In the next part of the presentation, Karla is going to walk you through our companion resource guide. And what that does is for every section of the tool itself, You are going to be able to find descriptive information and sample strategies of how to implement that specific inclusive teaching strategy. So it is a great resource to be able to just, you read a statement, you're not sure what it means, you're not sure if you do it, you can go directly to the companion resource guide and it will give you a description and give you resources to be able to actually share and engage in that actual strategy. And Karla, because I went into the tool, I have to reset it to be able to go back into the companion resource guide. So I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint if you want to start going through those slides, and we can share the companion resource summary at the end if that works.
Yeah, that works fine.
Okay. Let me just start that share again.
So what I'm going to do is walk folks through. I broke it up, and I'm going to talk about Principle 8.3 first, in terms of fostering collaboration, interdependence, and collective learning, and then crosswalk you into our tool into a couple of different sections that link to that UDL principle and talk about some of the strategies that help you do this, right? And so through that, Nannette, we're just seeing the slide deck. We're not seeing the presenter view.
Okay.
And so the first one is when you get into the tool, we broke it up, and I'm going to talk about section 1B. And so that is the first section in terms of setting the tone for your learning environments, right? And the first one on the tool is initiating student connections, okay? And under that, there are several of them. And I want to talk about building rapport through regular use of icebreakers and collaborative thinking activities, right? So, this directly supports structured peer interaction and collective learning, right? And which is, again, what 8.3 is about. And so some of the examples I wanted to put up here, I'm not going to go into what each one of these are, but you can do things like using, starting your first class of the semester or quarter with some kind of connection activity with the class, right? So if you're virtual, you can use a whiteboard or other interactive apps, right? Share a whiteboard, prompt something like draw something that represents how you learn best, and have students like draw headphones or books or pathways, right? And they sketch icons or whatever. And why this works, right? It's playful, right? It gets people engaged. It's low stress. It's visual, right? It supports UDL with multiple means of expression, right? And it sparks conversation about learning preferences, right? You can do things like emoji check-ins, right? Asking students to post 1 to 2 emojis that capture how they're arriving to class, maybe. Invite a few volunteers to share why. Again, why does this work? It's UDL friendly, nonverbal options, right? Quick emotional temperature checks, right? It builds empathy and belonging. What's on your desk means you can have students grab something on their desk and share why it's meaningful or useful to them, right? So again, it's humorous. It kind of brings the stress down of being in an academic learning space sometimes. It's authentic. It builds quick rapport, right? It's low cognitive load at the start of class. You can do things like a 1-3-6 method. So this is working from that individual level all the way to that large group level. So 1 would mean they do an individual reflection on something. 3 means they pair share. And then 6 means it's more of a group, a team synthesis, right? So it moves you from that individual to a small to a larger group thinking in a structured flow that students don't necessarily feel so bogged down with or intimidated by. Jigsawing, I don't know if you are familiar with what that means, right? You can assign something, and each student has to become, quote unquote, an expert in one piece of content. And then they have to teach somebody that content, right? And so why it works, this is collaborative teaching. It's distributing expertise. And again, takes the focus in co-learning in that co-learning environment and puts the responsibility of their co-learning back into them together, right? You can go to the next slide.
Sorry, I was answering the chat.
No, that's good. So the next one on the tool, so we went through one B, and when you look at the tool, this will make sense, how I'm labeling it, but I'm putting it in the slide deck so you can follow along where I am in the tool when you go back to the tool, right? So we did 1B3. I'm going to be on 1B4 now, right? And this is around providing opportunities for students to provide feedback on their learning experience. So again, this encourages shared responsibility for the learning environment and co-construction of the course experience. So you can do things like some of the examples here are start, stop, continue check-ins, right? So you can ask, if you're not familiar with that is you can ask students periodically, start. What is one thing that we could start doing to improve your learning, right? So again, having them self-awareness and self-reflection is a skill set that you have to build. And so by doing this with them, they start building this, right? So what is one thing that we can start doing to improve your learning, right? Stop. What should we stop doing, right? That isn't supporting learning, right? And then continue. What should we continue because it's actually working to help you learn, right? And it works because it's quick, it's non-threatening, and it generates actionable data, right? Anonymous weekly learning pulses, right? What this means is, maybe use anything from 1 to 3 recurring prompts in a form or your learning management system, right? What helped you learn this week, right? So you can set that up as a discussion board or however you want to do it. You can set it up as an interactive app that they enter into and spit out maybe a word cloud or something, right? What barriers did you encounter, right? What actually inhibited your learning? What's one question that you're still holding? So all our learners, some are not comfortable speaking up, some are really intimidated by even asking questions, right? So this is an easy way to get them to ask their question. It provides real-time formative data that you can act on quickly, right? Mid-semester feedback conferences or feedback. You can do that via survey, or you can do that meeting with students, right? Collect mid-course feedback and review it openly with students in front of the class, but obviously anonymously, right? Summarize themes that you collected, right? Of what your own learners said were strengths and what they said that were improvement areas, right? You want to be open and transparent, share what you can implement, right? And explain what cannot change and why. There might be things that they actually are really, really telling you need to change, and there may be good reasons that you're not going to be able to change those. And be transparent about that, right? And so this boosts trust and agency, right? It improves motivation for the second half of the semester. Next slide, please. So the next one is we're going to go to 1C2, emphasizing growth mindset, right? Providing opportunities for trial and error without penalty. This also addresses UDL 8.4 as well. So things like, this includes like syllabus language that frames learning as iterative. This is really important, right? The old joke is it's in the syllabus, right? Well, you need to intentionally actually build your syllabus to be engaging, interactive, and very explicit, right? About what is expected. And so syllabus language that frames learning, and we should be including what we're expecting out of how learning works. Learners, some of our young learners and some of our older learners don't necessarily even understand how learning works, right? And so again, using things like statements in your syllabus that say mistakes are expected at the edges of your learning, right? They're evidence that you're pushing your thinking, right? Your first attempt is not your final understanding. This course is structured to support revision, reflection, and improvement, right? So again, really, really, we have a lot of high achievers in our classes, and oh my gosh, they got something wrong, and then they go into the spiral, right? So we want to frame learning as iterative, right? Assessment in this course values progress over perfection, right? Again, modeling intellectual humility, really important, right? Share a time that their thinking changed, right? Um, I share as faculty, as role models in front of the classroom. I start out my classes off with like, this is a co-learning environment, right? I may know more about you on some things, but I'm also going to learn from you on a lot of other things. And I'm going to share with you some things about myself, right? Here's some times where I didn't get it right. And this is what I'm actually changing for your class because of last year's class, because I didn't do things that necessarily aligned with what I thought they would do, right? Be transparent, articulate how you're going to revise work, right? State when you don't know something and walk through how you're going to find the answer. So model that stuff. Because they think that we're these perfect human beings and these experts that are standing in front of them, and that is not at all the case. And we need to equalize that power differential every time we can. Um, Low stakes, right? Or ungraded practice assignments, really, really important. And multiple attempt quizzes. Again, these are the things that are gonna help you reinforce what you just said about learning, right? Progress, not perfection, right? Revision opportunities on major assignments. So again, we're teaching our learners that learning is a process, right? It's not a one and done. You don't do one thing. Did you learn it? Did you not learn it and move on? No, you're going to continue to learn and you get another chance to do that. Next slide. Um, so fostering, again, still 8.3. We're going to move to section 3 on our tool. Inclusive language, right? Consideration of student circumstances. Now, this is humanizing our learners. This is helping them to realize in their seats, we see them as entire human beings and not just somebody who's paying money to come in and learn something and leave, right? We actually care about them, right? So again, varying methods of engagement to ensure all student voices are heard. So this explicitly names collaborative work as a strategy for engagement. So again, meaning that UDL principle, collaboration. So some of the examples here, structured turn-taking protocols, these things like round robin or one then done, other examples listed there, these ensure that everyone contributes without pressure, right? So round robin, right, is when one student shares one idea or a question or reflection or whatever your prompt is, and then they call on somebody else, right? So the pressure's off of you in terms of putting somebody on the spot. All the students know that everyone's going to have to do this, and this is part of the learning experience. One then done norm is that students can contribute once before others have had another chance to contribute. So again, those people who are more vocal, right? This holds them in check a little bit. We're going to use the one and done norm, make sure everybody has the opportunity to contribute and share, and we get to learn from them, and then you can contribute again, right? A token system, this can be virtual or physical, right? Students get two or three tokens to use for speaking, encourages balance, right? And these work because they reduce dominance and they distribute this airtime equitably, right? Anonymous, anonymous or low risk input channels. This is great for students who prefer reflection over spontaneous speaking, right? So again, using these kinds of things really helps those not as confident learners, those hesitant learners for a variety of reasons about why they want to speak up. They might be feeling like they're going to be judged, or they may feel like they have a completely different perspective than anybody else in the room and they're going to be made fun of or whatever, right? So that's a really great way to address those kind of dynamics, right? These collaborative group structures, multimodal expression options, and then equity-based cold calling. The equity-based cold calling is just a supportive, non-punitive technique. So you frame it like, I'll be inviting all voices into the conversation today, right? I'll call on you so we can hear a diverse set of perspectives, and you can always pass and come back, right? So again, giving people that empowerment, right? You're getting across that you really want to hear from them, but you understand they may not feel comfortable at that time, right? And that's okay. So it works because students know their voices matter. It reduces anxiety when done with choice and respect. Next slide. This next one is cultivating common ground, right? And this is 4.2, providing opportunities for students to highlight learning gained through interactions with classmates. That's what it's labeled on our tool. And some examples are like this classmate spotlight share or teach back moments or learning galleries or collective knowledge maps, right? So a classmate spotlight share means, you know, at the end of a session or maybe even at the end of the week, you invite volunteers to share, say, one valuable insight that they actually learned from a peer of theirs that week, right? Or that session, right? A moment when a teammate helped them understand a concept. So again, it's empowering them as a group, their co-learning environments in a very high stakes way, right? This builds a culture of acknowledging collective learning. Teach back moments, again, invite students to explain a concept where they learned from a peer, right? Or attribute the idea to a classmate, right? Give people credit where credit is due to the co-learning environments, right? And then learning galleries or collective knowledge maps are things that then you annotate the board with, I learned blank from blank's idea, right? So again, this gives their learning credit to the peers in the room. And then people can add comments to that thing, like this helped me see ... right? This helped explain this concept, right? So it helps the peer learning visible and makes it communal, right? Next slide. So, and then the last one I think is in this section, define, communicate course faculty and students' roles and discussions. You know, be specific with expectations for each activity is what I can say. I know my classes are loaded with different assignments or different activities that I assess differently. So they get a rubric for every single one of those. In terms of one reflection assignment, I may have a rubric that is slightly different than a different reflection assignment, right? So explicitly share the expectation of learners and engagement for the activity. So we're going to do this activity in class and we're going to use the one and done norm, right? So again, remember every time you do something, put out what the expectation of engagement is very clearly, right? And so another great way to do that is insight capture role. So during group work, this is when you assign one student to track some key insights in that group work, right? Or questions raised, and then the contributions from the different group members. And then they share what the group learned from each other, right? So again, this is a collective learning strategy that puts the accountability of learning and the power into their hands. And it does it in a way that becomes really, really more like a rhythm of learning. It becomes a natural process for them. And then certainly learning galleries or collective knowledge maps we talked about, and peer feedback appreciation. Again, making opportunities for your learners to acknowledge and give credit to where credit's due in that learning environment, not just to you as the faculty member, right? Next. So we're going to move to 8.4, right? Foster belonging and community. And there's several points on our tool that I just pulled out quickly that addresses this, right? The first one is introducing yourself, right? First thing we do with our learners, right? We introduce ourselves. Well, one of the things on our tools talks about pronouns, 1A2. And so you can do this, and this is just a way to make sure that we're engaging with every learner in the room respectfully and in the way that respects who that learner is. And that is down to gender and gender pronouns or non-gendered pronouns, right? So using a survey to ask learners their preferred names and pronouns, you can do it that way, right? Because oftentimes our rosters include names that those students don't use. Role model by introducing yourself with your pronouns. You heard me introduce myself in this session with my pronouns, right? That takes a lot of pressure off of the learners in the room that really need to know what kind of space they're in, right? It may not matter to the people who actually have gendered pronouns that match who they are, right? That seem to match what the assumption is they are, right? But it does matter big time to the people in the room that really need to know that this space, they can be their authentic selves, right? Utilize an educational resource shared with learners. I put it on my learning management system in my course, right? Why is this important? Because again, there's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of horrific things that you see in the media and social media news about making fun of pronouns. But this is actually something we know a lot about in terms of the research in health and well-being and mental health of people. And so provide information relative to why we're actually asking this. And maybe you'll learn something, right? Next slide. Again, affirmation of commitment to college values, DEI, and accessibility. So this is you creating that learning environment. This is you fostering that environment for belonging and sense of community, right? So frame the course as a shared community built around institutional values, right? Maybe include, right, an explicit values and DEI statement in your syllabus, right? So for example, our learning community is grounded in respect, integrity, and curiosity, right? We commit to practices that uphold inclusion, equity, and accessibility for all members. So again, doesn't have to be long. Maybe diverse perspectives strengthen our learning, right? We welcome questions, experiences, and viewpoints from all students. So again, it's sending that message to all learners in the classroom that they do matter, right? No matter who they are, where they come from, how they got there, they matter and their learning matters, and we want to hear from them, right? It signals belonging. This communicates shared norms and affirms institutional values, right? Co-creating these community agreements, right? On day one or week one, collaboratively build agreements together, right? Ask your class, right? Well, what's important to you in this learning environment as we go through this term, right? What do we all need to do in this room for you, right? You know, respecting diverse viewpoints, using inclusive language, right? Ensuring equitable speaking time, access needs and flexible participation options, right? So help them do it together. And then, of course, normalize access needs as a shared responsibility. Did you already switch? You already switched. So again, initiating student connections is another way on this tool that we meet UDL 8.4, right? Learning to pronounce students' names. And there's lots of literature around this. It actually crosses very much over into the research that misgendering is falling into as well, right? It's not just being misgendered, but also you're actually not pronouncing somebody's name correctly, right? And oftentimes it's people's different cultural names or whatever that we take shortcuts, right? And the students even tell us, oh, it's okay, just call me this. Well, is it really okay, or they just got used to saying that, right? And what we know from the literature is that it really does matter. And so utilize learning management system apps to have students post, hear my name, right? There's an easy app that does that. Please take time as the faculty to learn how to pronounce your students' names, right? And your class, the cohort, right? Or the students and the other students in the room, right? Emphasize how important that is. So if feasible, you can set up a 5-minute. I know some of us have hundreds of students in classes, but some of us don't have hundreds of students. If it's feasible, set up 5 minutes, get to know you meetings with each student and ask them how to pronounce their names, right? Tell them you want to get it right. It really matters to you. It's part of you getting to know them. And there's strong evidence of this as a practice for belonging. Next. Communicating belief in students and high expectations, right? This encourages students to attend office hours early and often. Use things like belief statements in classes about what you believe learners can do. Again, these low stakes opportunities. Making high expectations transparent, right? Share what each rating of an assignment might look like. Give examples of those assignments. Next one, communicating belief in students and high expectations, right? Um, this is like things like early term individual check-ins or providing growth-oriented feedback. Just telling me I did something well doesn't tell me anything. You need to give feedback that really, really tells the learner how they need to change something, right? And also reinforce what they did well, but you also need to give them feedback that they can work with, make it actionable. Um, and next slide.
That's it for you, Karla, I
That's
believe.
it for me. All right.
Yeah, so I do want to, I know we're short of on time, just walk you through because there was a question about what those numbers Karla was talking about. Did the screen switch to the companion summary?
Yeah, it did. It did.
Perfect. So the link that we'll provide you will bring you to this companion summary. You'll see it's a 15-page working, living, breathing document that we're constantly updating. This was the background and the teaching practices that I referred to earlier. But Karla was getting those numbers because each section of the tool is numbered and lettered, and then all the individual questions that we ask you of do you do this and how do you do it is listed in the left-hand column. So that's where the 1A1 comes to. And these are the resources we provide for you in terms of, well, how might I do this? If it's a strategy that you want to implement, you're not quite sure how to, it will give you at least some resources. It might be links to research articles. It could be links to other universities' websites that we found had a great guide. So we are trying to be as comprehensive as possible. But this is where you will see all of the sections of the tool and corresponding resources just to give you an idea of where to get started. And we know that this is a huge endeavor. Again, this is meant for your own self-assessment and reflection, and hopefully to be able to incorporate, because there is a lot of overlap between UDL and inclusive and equitable teaching. So a lot of these strategies will cross both realms. So that is what the companion summary looks like, an easy document. You'll also have access to a box account if there are specific articles that we have listed in there for you. Intention, we're going to do if we had time. What we feel is really important is when you go to a session like this, really trying to narrow down, are there 2 or 3 strategies or things that you've heard that you want to set an action plan for? We all have good intentions when we go to a session and say, that was great information, but then months go by and we don't necessarily do anything with that information. So we are encouraging you to sit down, reflect. Are there some strategies that you can commit to incorporating into your work, and really set target implementation dates for yourself? Bring a colleague, bring a learner ally into the conversation of who can be your buddy or partner in terms of implementing that, and sharing your access. And then these are the QR codes. You can get to the companion resources through the tool itself. But I know you'll be posting this video, so you'll be able to scroll to this part of the video and also be able to get the QR code if you want to bookmark it for when you want to take a look at that inclusive teaching tool, and also the companion resource document. They're in Qualtrics and box files, so they should always be live. And if you have any questions, we can always reach out to Karla or myself, and we can get that fixed for you as well. So I know that was really quick. I apologize. We're happy to take any questions that you might have or feedback. Again, you can ask in the chat, or happy to come off mute, and we can address any questions or comments that you have.
So thank you so much. And there's a question, are the QR codes different than the links? No, they should bring you to the materials. Sometimes it's easier to click a link when you're in this type of environment and be able to bookmark it on your computer or copy it. So I want to thank our presenters. Nannette, could you stop sharing your screen, please?
Absolutely.
Yeah. and open this up to anyone who has a question. We'll stay on for a few more minutes. Um, so if you have a question, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question. This was fabulous. So much work goes into this type of tool development. Uh, I done it and I know what it takes, and
It was a labor of love, that's for sure.
100%. And to get that, all the feedback from your colleagues and the individuals who have participated, it just goes to show the dedication you both have to this type of, and I know you headed it up, Carla. This was something you,
Nannette, yes.
yeah, oh,
Nannette,
Nannette headed it up. Okay. Either way, somebody headed it up. And
Collaboration and partnership.
there you
yes.
go. Really amazing. So thanks to each of you for a wonderful presentation. And again, we'll stay on for a couple of minutes if somebody has a question. And can't say enough good things about this work. So important. And to have all those strategies. Some of the conversation, I don't know if you saw in the chat, was, well, is this good teaching? And Allison Posey, who formerly worked at CAST, would say, well, it's more than good teaching. And so I would say that because it's really doing it up front rather than in the moment. So really designing up front. Any questions from our colleagues who are still here? Um, Otherwise, I think we're good. I don't see anybody unmuting. So thanks to all of our participants today. And thanks to our presenter. Stay safe in the snow if you're in a snowy area. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.